Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1998 Represent. It is Captain Picard Day, so this week didn't have an episode like we normally do on Thursdays. We're having an episode today on Friday, which is June 16th, which is Captain Picard Day. So in the episode The Pegasus, I believe it was The Pegasus, they have Captain Picard Day on the ship, and people took that stardate from that episode, kind of reverse engineered it, or just ran it through a stardate calculator, and figured out that that day of the year, if it was a human calendar, would be June 16th. So today, for Captain Picard Day, we're talking about Star Trek Insurrection. To celebrate, I actually have a nice little cup here of some tea, Earl Grey hot, of course. Got this, almost a coffee cup, teacup on, picked it up on Etsy, bought it a few years ago, and it's a Bodum coffee cup, and these are, or teacup, coffee cup, whatever it might be, and these were the brand of cups that they used on the Next Generation for the various teacups, and Picard would be often seen drinking out of one of these. This isn't like a screen-used one or anything like that, but this brand of glassware was what they used on the show. And I love me some Earl Grey. So today we're taking a look at Star Trek Insurrection. I believe this is the 9th Star Trek film overall. It's the third Next Generation film. So our first film for Next Generation was Generations, and then we had First Contact. First Contact being the one where it's solely Next Gen, but we have Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and then Nemesis being the four films that cast was a part of. I have some basic notes here to go over. So, Star Trek Insurrection was released December 11th, 1998. I didn't see this initially in theaters, so I've never seen it in the theaters. I've seen it on like VHS and DVD, and this one now is on Paramount Plus. It's streaming. It was on HBO or Max, whatever they're calling it now. It was on HBO for a while, and those films are now, most of them, I believe. I don't know if all of them are on there on Paramount, but they're on Paramount Plus now, and that's where I watched it this time. A few years ago when I saw it again, when I streamed it, it was on Amazon at one point as well. So, like I said, didn't see it in theaters, but remember renting it on like VHS or like DVD or something like that. I think, let me see how I would rate the Next Generation films. So, obviously, First Contact is number one. First Contact is one of the best Star Trek films ever made, easily the best Next Generation one. I would probably actually put this second. I don't really love Generations. I love the idea of Generations, where it's the original series crew working with the Next Generation crew. But that concept kind of falls apart when it's only like a few people from the original series that were actually in the movie. So like I believe Sulu was in that. It's been a while since I've seen it, but Sulu, like Scotty and like Kirk, of course. And I don't think a lot of the other cast members were even in it. So it kind of just, the concept is cool, but when you can't get the entire cast, it kind of falls apart. So I say I go First Contact easily, then Insurrection, then Generations, and then Nemesis. Nemesis is just kind of not great, but Nemesis, my most recent rewatch, though, was better than I remember it being, but still not very good overall. But back to the notes here. This had a budget of about $70 million, and it grossed $117.8 million. I don't know if back then that was considered to be a failure. Like, it made more than it cost, but now I believe the general consensus is a film needs to gross, I think it's called like a 2.5x multiplier, or just 2.5. So if it cost, it needs to make 2.5 times its budget to be considered to be successful. And I think that's where they kind of factor in like marketing and budgets and all that. So made 70 million, or cost 70 million, made 117. But again, marketing, don't know how much like they spent on marketing and all that. Again, said it was a ninth film. This one, it feels more like an episode than a movie. I think the action and what have you in First Contact was just better. There are some decent action scenes in this, but overall it feels more like an episode than than like an actual like a film. Like there's not a lot of action. It's definitely a little bit more subdued. There's a lot of just sitting around and talking. Um, but I don't think that's necessarily bad. Like I don't necessarily know if this would be worth seeing in the theater necessarily because it does play out like a two-part episode, maybe a little bit longer than two parts if you factor in commercials, but feels more like an episode to me. Again, like First Contact being the best, this one First Contact's kind of a tough act to follow because you're using one of the most iconic villains in the Borg as the central plot, and then you are introducing this really cool concept of them going back to it was like back when before they're basically the Borg are trying to prevent First Contact. So a really good story. It played into one of the most iconic Next Generation episodes of all time, which is the Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2. Part 1, I think, being more iconic just because that ending is amazing. But they're both really good episodes. Definitely standout episodes in that series. So we were basically playing up to that, playing up to the Borg, which were um, I don't know if the Borg had been introduced into Voyager at that point or not, because that was '96. But this the villains in this one, as cool as they are definitely they're not as cool as like the Borg. I don't think. I'm gonna pause to get some more of this Earl Grey to celebrate Picard Day. But the villains in this one, so there are basically two races. There is the Baku and the Sona, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Again, there's going to be spoilers for this movie, so if you haven't seen the movie, I would recommend watching it first. But they're basically the same race. One of the Baku are more peaceful, the Sona are more like aggressive, I guess. And the Sona have like the makeup effects are really cool because they have these like they have to constantly get these cosmetic surgeries done because they're basically just kind of like rapidly decaying. So there's like a scene where like F. Murray Abraham plays Ruafo. That's like their leader of that group. And you see a scene where he's got like his skin like here, like peeled down to here. They're like peeling it back or like stretching it out and then like stapling it in basically. The makeup on those characters was great. Like Worf is in it, so there's obviously like the really good like Klingon makeup as well. Let's see what we have here. Back to the notes. Apparently, I haven't played this game, but I've heard of it. It's called Star Trek Hidden Evil, and apparently it kind of ties into this movie. That came out, I think, like a year after this, but it ties into it. I've never actually played it, but I know of it and have seen like I can definitely recognize the box art for it, but I've never played it, unfortunately. Um, so there's some bits in this movie I really liked. I liked that for the most part of the movie, Riker actually loses the beard. It's a throwback to the first season of Next Generation where Riker obviously looks, in my opinion, better with the beard, but it was just cool to see him kind of without that beard again. There's some really interesting, some funny jokes in this movie. Like right when Riker shaves, like he's basically comments that his beard is smoother than an android's bottom, and then Data actually like goes like touches it, says it's not. Riker walks away laughing. It feels like they and Jonathan Frakes also directed this film. I believe he directed First Contact as well. Don't know if he directed. I don't think he directed. I don't think he directed Nemesis, but directed these two. The first two, or not first two, but First Contact and Insurrection. But you could tell that Jonathan Frakes was cracking up right when the scene was ending, and you kind of just cuts. You see him walking away laughing. There's some actually pretty good comic relief in this film. Some stuff is just overall really silly, like the HMS Pinafore Data, because Data basically goes rogue temporarily, and they have to distract him. Because basically Worf and Picard are flying a shuttle to intercept Data shuttle, and they start playing the song from the HMS Pinafore to kind of distract him, so they can like lock onto his ship and like they basically like manually lock onto it to basically bring him back to the Enterprise because he's malfunctioning at that point. But that's one joke. A joke is basically the planet that they're going to has these like rejuvenating properties. That's kind of why Riker and Troy get a little more frisky together. That's why Geordi's eyes actually like regenerate, or the optic nerves regenerate. There's a really cool scene where he's like basically like seeing a real almost said sunset, a real sunrise for the first time with actual eyes and not through a visor or visual implants. Because he had the visor on for the most of the show, and I think he had that in Generations as well. But come First Contact, LeVar Burton would just have these kind of like these contacts that were basically like technology. Like you could just explain it. Technology is advanced that you can now just have. You don't need the visor anymore. You have these ocular, these visual, these optic implants that basically look like eyes. And I just know that from various interviews, LeVar Burton said acting in the basically the visor like banana clip thing was just really hard to do. So basically, just acting through his context is probably just a lot easier. But there's a scene where he basically is seeing a sunrise for the first time. It makes Picard like dance to mambo music, or was it mambo music? I think it's mambo music because he goes into his quarters and he's like, play something Latin, and like it's like specify. He's like, play the mambo. And he does this like he's like dancing. It's really silly. There's a scene where he's got this weird like like a headdress from these other aliens that are on the ship that are basically like they're in there and then they're not there anymore. They're not really that important to the film, but part of their culture is like wearing this weird like it's almost like a go kind of drapes over. It's got beads on it and what have you. It's just kind of silly. There's a scene where basically Worf gets a pimple or a I forget what Worf called it, but it was basically the Klingon equivalent of a pimple. And Worf's hair gets all weird at one point, and it's basically the signs of like Klingon puberty. And Picard is like, "Hey, like if you get aggressive tendencies, let me know." And there's a really cool scene where basically like they're shooting at these drones with these phaser rifles, and Worf actually just takes a phaser rifle like a baseball bat and smacks it, and he's like feeling aggressive tendencies, Captain, or something like that. But yeah, some of the comedic relief is really good. One bit that's really funny, which I don't think was meant to be funny, is there's a part where basically Rafo's plans kind of get foiled, and he just lets out this really weird scream. I don't think the scream was intended to be humorous, but it's hilarious. You should just I'll see if I can find a video of it on YouTube and like link it in the description because it's just hilarious. There's a really cool point where Riker does, I think they call it the Riker maneuver, and they're in this nebula of this weird gas, and they basically use a thing called the ram scoop to suck this gas up because they're being pursued by these Sona ships, and they suck up this basically flammable gas, I guess, and they basically like divert it back out and fire upon it and ignite it, which blows up one of the ships and disables the other. And I think that the line is Geordi, I think, says something to because they do split the group up at one point where I think on the ground it's Picard, Worf, Crusher, Troy, and Data, I think, and then on the Enterprise it's Geordi and Riker. But Geordi says, if this maneuver succeeds, they might call it the Riker maneuver because there's a whole thing with the Picard maneuver from the first season, and it's kind of like a really cool just thing. So one funny bit is I forget the name of I think it's Gravis, and they made computer joysticks and controllers and what have you back in the 90s. I don't know if they're still around, but there's a part where they have to activate the manual steering column for the Enterprise, and it's like this like platform, and this joystick comes out of it, and it's like literally like a computer joystick you would probably find in like the like late 90s, and you just see Riker maneuvering it. It's kind of silly, but and now we're going to get into the overall kind of just plot discussions for this film. So it starts off on this very peaceful looking planet. There's like people just like walking around farming and like doing some blacksmithing. It definitely looks like it could be a pre-warp civilization at that point. We come to realize later in the film that it's not, but you do see something go off. You do see these people walking. You see from the perspective of, I think it's called a duck blind. And if you ever have watched the episode of Next Generation called "Who Watches the Watchers," one of the better episodes, one of my favorites, is there is a Starfleet research team observing. I think it was like they were called the Mintakans. They were somewhat related to Vulcans, but they were pre-warp, so they had kind of like basically primitive technology and what have you. So they're not supposed to be interfered with due to the Prime Directive and all that. But you see this holographic like screen, and you see there's it's a screen and there's a square in the middle, and when the people that are you see stuff in the middle of the screen that isn't there in or that shouldn't be there because it's like they're invisible, but or invisible to the people on the planet. But there's these Starfleet researchers that are basically among the population, walking around. I imagine they have like holographic projectors on their like suits to make them invisible, or cloaking devices or something. Maybe not cloaking devices because I don't know if cloaking devices in the lore of Star Trek were allowed, or like if it was on your body, it was cool. I don't really know. But you do see something start happening, and you see basically they get on the comm badge and say that the android is malfunctioning. Obviously, probably referring to Data. You see Data basically like removes his helmet, and you see basically it's weird because you basically just see like a disembodied Data head moving around. You see him shooting phasers and stuff, and he basically he's off. The rest of the Enterprise crew is on the Enterprise for that delegation I was talking about earlier. And they get some news about Data malfunctioning, so they basically have to now track Data down and get him. While Starfleet, I believe it was Admiral Doherty, is working with the villains, unbeknownst to he doesn't know that they're the villains at that point. And they're like, well, we need to bring Data in, we need to do this, and basically they're like, hey, if we need to deactivate Data because this is weird. So Picard is like, well, if we need to deactivate him, I want to be the one to do it because like I'm his commanding officer and all that. So that's when Worf and Picard go after him. They get Data, and they realize that something is off there because they find some damaged like memory chips or memory engrams, I believe. And Data had actually stumbled upon, which we discover later in the movie, basically a holo ship, like a ship with a holodeck on it. And when they get to that ship eventually in the film, there is a recreation of like the village square in that holodeck. So they realize basically like Picard, and they do realize that these people on this planet are actually warp capable, but they haven't used warp in a long time. They haven't left that planet in a long time because they kind of have like rejected technology at that point. And so like they're basically they also don't really age, or they age very very slowly. So the main kind of love interest for the film for Picard is a lady named Anij, who I believe she says like she's like 300 years old or something. And the actress, I don't remember the actress's name, but when she played her, she was probably like like mid to late 30s, maybe early 40s. Don't really know. But they don't really age that much, and it's something in the planet's rings that causes this slowed aging process. But also, this is the stuff that's causing, like Worf to get the pimple. It's causing Riker and Troy to get little bit closer. It's according making Data's eyes, or not Data's eyes, Geordi's eyes, like regenerate and all that kind of stuff as well. So you can definitely see why Starfleet would be interested in this planet, because the Admiral's plans was to basically harvest the power from these planetary rings to kind of just use for like basically be like, hey, like, well, if everybody had access to this, we could basically just like it would be really beneficial. And then, but the thing is, they need to evacuate the planet to do so, and they're basically like being forced onto this holographic ship so they can abandon the planet. But it turns out that the Sona and the Baku are actually the same race. They do some scan on one of them earlier, or later in the film, and it shows that the DNA and their like genetic structure is the same. It's that like I guess 100 years prior to the film, a group of people on that planet kind of like went off to kind of do their own thing, and have all kinds of diseases now, and they want to go back to that planet, but they also want to take revenge on the Baku for doing that. And then Picard at one point even goes to the Admiral and says, like, you've like just been basically like this has been a blood feud that's going on for hundreds of years, or at least 100 years, and you kind of sided with them. And that at that point, the Admiral, who is basically trying to, because basically it's Picard going against orders and his crew going against orders for most of the film. But the Admiral eventually is like telling Ruafo, the main villain, he's like, hey, this is over. We need to like stop like doing what we're doing. And that's when Ruafo kills him. He kills him in a really cool way, though. He puts him in this chair, and it's got this like light that comes over it. and it's a thing that they use to kind of stretch their skin out. So he just turns it on, and it basically like stretches the animal skin out, and like basically potentially probably like crushes the skull because you see like blood start coming out and like cuts form and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, they are trying to basically just evacuate the planet, or the Sona are trying to basically take people off the planet so they can use this harvester to harvest the energy out of the rings. And basically, everybody's kind of on the run. They hide in these caves for a while. They come up a way with isolinear tagging to basically like shoot people with these like chips because there's basically transport inhibitors on this like on the path that they're following, and then the caves have this mineral that make it hard to transport through. But they find a way to get some people off the planet. Picard and Anij get shot by this stuff, and they end up on the Soda ship. And then it's basically they find a way to activate this energy collector. But basically, what happens is one of the Soda eventually kind of defects and helps Picard out, and they have basically a plan to transport the Soda crew members off of their ship onto the Hollow ship and make it look like they have never been transported before. If you've ever seen Ready Player One, it's kind of the thing where the actor is Ben Mendelsohn. I forget the character's name. It was like Sorrento. They basically try to they basically trap Sorrento in the Oasis when he thinks he's not in the Oasis, kind of thing. So it's like they're on the Hollow ship, but it looks like they're still on their own ship, and the energy collector's going on. And eventually, Ruafo sees that there's like a tear in the Hollow grid at one point, and like shoots like don't know if it's a phaser or like a disruptor of some kind on it. And eventually realizes they've been transported and that the controls for the thing have been disabled. So Picard goes over to the collector to actually disable it, and Ruafo goes over there, ends up like basically like dying on the thing, and they basically get off of the collector, and basically all is well. Basically, Picard says like he's got like a bunch of shore leaves coming up, and he might just go to that planet to like hang out at some point. But that's basically the end of the film. Like I said earlier in the video, it definitely kind of pales in comparison to First Contact. First Contact was kind of just like had like success written all over it. This was a lot harder to sell as a movie, I think. It feels like more like an episode. And I also have the theory that so in 1998, like toward the end of the year, we got the first teaser trailer for Star Wars Episode 1. And this came out in December of that year. And I think a lot of people were just so excited for Star Wars, they just kind of ignored this movie. I didn't ignore it because I didn't want to see it. I just didn't have time to see it. And I was like working like, I think I had like a part-time job on weekends and not a lot of money to go to movies. So, and I don't even know the local theater I went to actually even got this in, because like for a while that like until like the early 2000s, it was only like a 4-screen theater, and like they wouldn't always get movies on time anyway. So they may have got it eventually, but it may have been like a month or so after it came out. But like I said earlier in the video, never got around to seeing it in theaters. Like rented it on like a VHS or DVD or something. And I still think it's a fun time. It's not the best Star Trek movie, but if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. It's got some fun moments in it as well. And I love that they went back to and had Jonathan Frakes shave the beard off for this movie. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching. Remember to have, not sure how you're going to celebrate Picard Day. Maybe watch an episode of Next Generation. Maybe drink some Earl Grey. But again, happy Picard Day to everyone. Again, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.